What's up, guys? Welcome to the line change. And in this video, we're going to be going over and looking at the 2025-2026 Vancouver Canucks schedule. We're going to be looking at home games, away games, but we're obviously going to be focusing more on the home games. The schedule came out earlier today. I wanted to do a video on it and just go over some of the games, at least a few games in particular that kind of jump out at me for certain reasons. And so yeah, we're gonna take a look at the schedule and we're gonna break it down. And I can't wait for this season to start. Before we get started though, I would like to give a big shout out and thank you to my sponsor, Gassy Jack Art, maker of that incredible artwork you see there behind me. And you guys can check him out yourselves at gassjackart.com. And he still has his end of season sale going on, where you can get 2 prints and get an additional 2 prints for free. So go ahead, check him out. He's also on Instagram at Gassy Jack Art. So go ahead, check him out, gassyjackart.com. So let's go ahead and dive right into the main topic. And that is the Vancouver Canucks 2025-2026 schedule. Let's go ahead and I'm going to get this up on the screen for you guys can see. We're going to start in September 2025. Obviously, this is going to be the preseason. I have it kind of blown up quite a bit just so you guys can see. So obviously, preseason starts September 21st against the Seattle Kraken in Seattle. And then they play the Calgary Flames on September 24th in Calgary at 7 p.m. Pacific start time. Then they have their first home preseason game on the 26th of September against the Kraken. And then they play the Edmonton Oilers on the 28th. This appears to be a away game, but the time is yet to be determined. And that is it for September. Let's take a look at October. And then their next game, October 1st, they play the Calgary Flames at 6 p.m. Pacific in Calgary. And then they are back home for the preseason on October 3rd to play the Edmonton Oilers. Once again, this game is to be determined, at least the time. And then they play again on the 9th of October against the Calgary Flames at 7 p.m. Pacific. This is the home opener for the Vancouver Canucks this year. So once again, much like last year, they will open the season at home against the Calgary Flames. Hopefully this year will be a different result as opposed to last year. So this is going to be I would say a key game for the Vancouver Canucks. I don't have it on my list, but I'm going to go ahead and add it to my list of key games for the Vancouver Canucks, which I will get to in just a second here. And then you have your next game on October 11th in Edmonton against the Oilers. And then you have the St. Louis Blues coming to town on October 13th. And actually, I got this completely wrong. But I will fix that on my thing. But I wanted to point out that this is a key game for the Vancouver Canucks, not in general, but this obviously marks the return of Pius Suter to Vancouver. His first time playing his now former team on October 13th. So some fans might be interested in going to this game just to see Pius Suter and see what kind of reaction he gets. We shall see. But October 13th, the Canucks play the St. Louis Blues. Moving down to the 16th of October, they are in Dallas for a game. And then on the 17th, they play in Chicago. So a little 2-game road trip there. And actually, this is the start of a 5-game road trip for the Vancouver Canucks. So they're in Dallas, in Chicago, have a day off, and then they're in Washington, another day off, and then they're in Pittsburgh, day off, and then they're in Nashville to finish out their road trip. And then they come back home starting on the 25th against the Montreal Canadiens, followed by the Edmonton Oilers on October 26th. And then they play the New York Rangers on October 28th at home. And I wanted to point out this being a key game, as this was the first on my list, as I completely missed the first St. Louis game. But as I mentioned, I wanted to point out some key Canuck home games, at least in my opinion, that are key games. this obviously October 28th being the first one versus the New York Rangers, the return of JT Miller. Now I want to talk a little bit about this game because this is a game that I absolutely want to go to, and I will obviously, do what I can to make sure that I can go to this game. Obviously, I'm not going to be the only one. A lot of people are going to want to go see this game because as I mentioned, it's a return of JT Miller, and it's his first time coming back to Vancouver since being traded back in January. Now, I've been eyeballing this game long before the schedule came out. I said it shortly after the trade. The first time the Rangers are in town, I want to go to that game. I will do what I can to try and go to that game. So I'm going to do my best to try and be at that game simply because I want to hear the reaction that JT gets from the Vancouver crowd. Who knows? Maybe we'll hear a little JT Miller chant. And if I don't hear it, I may just go ahead and start one and see if it catches on. But that is one of my first key games that I noticed when looking at this schedule for at least the home games. And all these key games are all home games. None of them are away games. So yeah, let's keep going. Next game, they play St. Louis in St. Louis on October 30th. So the day before Halloween. Let's move to November. First game of November is in Minnesota on November 1st. And then they are in Nashville on November 3rd. And then they are back home on November 5th against the Chicago Blackhawks. And this is another one of my key games that I wanted to point out. Obviously, November 5th versus Chicago, the Jason Dickinson revenge game is what I like to say. And some fans are already pointing this out. I noticed it on X earlier. And yeah, it's the Jason Dickinson revenge game for what he did to Filipino towards the end of the season. Especially, and now with us having Evander Kane, I would not be surprised one bit if Dickinson gets his comeuppance in this game and he gets targeted. So let's hope that the Canucks can get a little revenge for Filipino for the way not only that hit, but the fact that nothing happened to Dickinson as a result. He got no discipline whatsoever. Maybe send a message to Chicago and Dickinson. That ain't going to happen again. So there's that one. But continuing on, they play the Columbus Blue Jackets on November 8th. And then they are playing the Colorado Avalanche on the 9th. And then they play the Winnipeg Jets on the 11th to finish this little homestand. And then they have a couple of days off before they are going to Carolina on the 14th of November to face the Hurricanes. And then they go on a mini 3-game road trip that sees them play in Tampa Bay on the 16th and then in Florida on the 17th. And then they're back home on the 20th to play the Dallas Stars. And then they have a couple of days off before they are back at home against the Calgary Flames on the 23rd of November. And then they go out on their California road trip, at least their first of the season, where they play the Anaheim Ducks on the 26th of November, and then the San Jose Sharks on the 28th of November, followed by the Los Angeles Kings on the 29th of November to finish off the month of November. Moving down to December, December 2nd, they played the Colorado Avalanche, and then they are back home for a homestand where they play the Utah Mammoth on the 5th of December. And I wanted to point this game out against Utah. Technically, yes, they've played Utah before last season, but this is technically the first time that Utah has come to town as the Utah Mammoth. So that's why I added this onto my list as a, quote unquote key game, as this is the first time we get to see the Mammoth per se, in Vancouver. And I gotta say, I probably said it before, but that logo is absolutely fire and I absolutely love it. And it's not gonna lie, it's making me kind of want a Utah jersey because that logo is so crisp and I absolutely love it. Let me know in the comment section down below if you guys agree with me on the Utah Mammoth logo. Next up, we have December 6th. The Minnesota Wild are in town for the first time. And that brings us to another key game that I highlighted. December 6th versus Minnesota, the Yakov Trenin revenge game. Now, for those of you that may have forgotten, Yakov Trenin is the one who I wouldn't say sucker punch. I mean, some people can call it a sucker punch. Some people don't. But it was basically Yakov Trenin is the one who broke Derek Forbort's orbital bone towards the end of the season when they got into that fight. And he's the one who kind of like went off his rocker a little bit, seemed a little unhinged. So I pointed this out as a revenge game. Hopefully, someone like Evander Kane, maybe even Forbort himself, can throw a little revenge back at Yakov Trenin. And not that I'm saying to, break his orbital bone or anything like that, but hopefully he gets targeted and, a message is sent that, you're not pushing us around, and who knows? So there's that one. Next up, we have December 8th against the Detroit Red Wings. And then you have December 11th, the Buffalo Sabres are in town. And then the Canucks go on a road trip. With stops in New Jersey on the 14th, New York on the 16th, and then Long Island on the 19th, followed by Boston on the 20th, and then Philadelphia on the 22nd. And then they're back home for at least one quick game against the San Jose Sharks on the 27th at home. And then they are in Seattle on the 29th. And then they're back home on the 30th against the Philadelphia Flyers. I want to point out this is another game that I am wanting to go to. Actually, more so my wife is wanting to go to, as my wife is a Philadelphia Flyers fan. I know, but no. So yeah, and this is always a game whenever the Flyers are in town. It's always a game that my wife and I are always like looking at and wanting to go to. And there's bound to be some fireworks between the two of us because things get a little hostile when the Philadelphia Flyers roll into town. So that is another game that I am hopefully able to go to along with the misses, and hopefully no fists are thrown between the two of us during that game. So, but that does it for December. Moving on to January and 2026. The Canucks start off the year at home against Seattle on the 2nd, followed by a game against the Boston Bruins on the 3rd, and then it is another key game that I highlighted, January 3rd versus Boston, the Tanner Jeannot revenge game. Now, this one I would say, is a minor one because I think a lot of people, or some people rather, have kind of let go of the whole Tanner Jeannot, concussing Brock Besser at the start, early on in the season. It obviously people more so remember the whole Trenin one and then the Dickinson one because it happened later on in the season. But I wanted to highlight this because I saw someone bring it up on X, mentioning, Tanner Jeannot revenge game for Brock Besser. Hopefully, the same thing with the other two. A message is sent to Jeannot, and, don't be concussing our players and whatnot. But I just wanted to highlight that game in particular, as that is, of course, also the first time the Bruins are in town. Next up, we have the Canucks going on quite the road trip, starting off in Buffalo against the Sabres, and then they're in Detroit against the Red Wings. Then they're in Toronto against the Maple Leafs on the 10th of January. Then they are in Montreal on the 12th, Ottawa on the 13th, and then in Columbus on the 15th, before they are back at home to face the Edmonton Oilers on the 17th. And then they're facing the Islanders on the 19th, the return of Bo Horvat once again to Vancouver on the 19th of January. They are hosting the Washington Capitals on the 21st, and then they're hosting the New Jersey Devils on the 23rd. So it's looking like the Hughes Bowl will be on January 23rd, 2026. You could technically call that a key game as well, with the Hughes brothers. Then of course this is actually their, I'm gonna just looking at it right now, looks like their longest stretch at home. So this is what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games at home in a row. Wow. So yeah, they host the Penguins on the 25th, Sharks on the 27th, the Ducks on the 29th, and then they end January with a game against the Toronto Maple Leafs on the 31st. Moving over to February, they start off on the road against the Utah Mammoth in Utah, and then they are in Vegas on the 4th against the Vegas Golden Knights, and then it's the Olympic break. So that goes from the 5th of February until the 24th of February, where they're at home for one game against the Winnipeg Jets, and then they're back out on the road on the 28th against the Seattle Kraken. So in the month of February, there's only one home game, which is kind of crazy, but at the same time, I understand it because the Olympics and whatnot. But that's a little insane to me that there's only one home game in the month of February, and that's going to be a hot ticket with it being the only home game of that month. Moving on to March, the Canucks are back at home on the 2nd against the Dallas Stars, followed by a game against the Carolina Hurricanes on the 4th. Then they're back out on the road for a quick 2-game road trip against the Chicago Blackhawks on the 6th, and then the Winnipeg Jets on the 7th. Then they're back home on the 9th against the Senators, at home against the Nashville Predators, at home against the Seattle Kraken on the 14th. Then on the 17th of March, they host the Florida Panthers. They host the Tampa Bay Lightning on the 19th. And then March 21st against the St. Louis Blues. And then, of course, they host the Anaheim Ducks on the 24th of March, followed by the Kings on the 26th. And then they are back out on the road against Calgary on the 28th. And then they're on the road against Vegas on the 30th. Let's take a look at April towards the end of the season. They start off April in Colorado on the 1st, and then they're on the 2nd. They are in Minnesota before they come back home to host the Utah Mammoth once again on the 4th, and then they host the Vegas Golden Knights on the 7th, going on their second California road trip. This time starting off in LA on the 9th, followed by San Jose on the 11th, and then finishing it off on the 12th in Anaheim. And then they host the LA Kings on the 14th, followed by their final regular season game is in Edmonton. So that game against the Kings is the final home game of the season. So that will likely be fan appreciation night, as they usually have that as the last home game of the season. And of course, they end their season in Edmonton, as I mentioned, on the 16th of April. Hopefully, before this, we'll know whether or not they're in a playoff position. Obviously, being a Canucks fan myself, obviously, let's move that. Obviously, I am 100% think that the Canucks are going to make the playoffs this year. I just have a sneaking feeling, much like some other people do. And, I can't help but root for this team and think positively about it. So I think, Canucks are going to make the playoffs this year. Where, we shall see. But obviously this schedule is interesting. Obviously, I pointed out some games that I'm interested in, like the New York Rangers game, first time JT Miller comes back to Vancouver. Obviously, the Flyers game because of my wife. And maybe that first time the Utah Mammoth come into town, maybe that game as well kind of stands out to me as well. But I want to know what you guys think. Which games stand out to you guys? Let me know in the comment section down below. And hope you guys enjoyed this video. Just going over the 2025-2026 schedule. And also, what are your thoughts on that only one home game in the month of February? What are your thoughts on it? Let me know once again in the comment section down below. And as always, if you guys like this video, be sure to hit that like button. If you want to stay up to date on all your Vancouver Canucks content, be sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you don't miss a single video. You can find and interact with us on social media. You can find us on Facebook. Just search The Line Change to find our Facebook page. You can find us on Instagram at The Line Change. You can find us on X at Line Change Van. You can find us on TikTok at the TLC Podcast. And you can also find us on Blue Sky at The Line Change. Feel free to give us a follow on all of our social media platforms. If you prefer an audio version of this podcast, you can find us on both Spotify and Apple Podcast. On Spotify, feel free to give us a follow as well as rate and review us. It is, of course, greatly appreciated. But that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Also, if you guys are looking for a video to check out, just the other day, I, of course, interviewed Brandon Astle of the Abbotsford Canucks, as I like to say, the voice of the Abbotsford Canucks. You guys can check out that video. I will leave a link to it at the end here. And I have some shorts. I've managed to clip some of those. I've managed to do some clips from that interview that I will be posting as shorts. So be on the lookout for those. And next week, I have another guest lined up. I don't have an exact day yet, but it will be Mr. Dave Hall, who will be a guest on the podcast next week. I'll be sure to let you guys know as soon as I have confirmation on which day. And I'm looking forward to not only speaking with Dave Hall, but for you guys to see the interview as well. So again, if you guys like this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next video.